Last October, I removed a poison ivy vine that had been growing up the trunk of a Stayman winesap apple tree since 1998. 26 years of growth. The base of the vine was the thickness of a broom handle. I removed it in about 40 minutes by myself with one-hand tool that cost me $11, and I never touched the plant with my skin. The tree is fine, I'm fine. Most American gardeners would have either poisoned the tree trying to kill the vine or given up and left it alone. There's a better way, and Daniel showed it to me the first time about 18 years ago. Stick with me to the end, because I'll share the one thing I do with the cut vine afterward that most people get completely wrong. Here's the part I want to confirm before I show you how I did it. That Stayman winesap is in its first spring since I took the vine off, and for the first time in years, it's putting on new growth right at the trunk. The vine had been girdling the sap flow without me realizing how much. The tree was alive, but it wasn't living. Now it is. Most American gardeners get this wrong in one of two ways. The first is they reach for Roundup or a brush killer and spray the vine while it's still hugging the tree. That herbicide moves through the shared root zone in the soil, and I've watched it kill two of my neighbor's apple trees outright. The second is they put on a pair of leather gloves and grab the vine and pull. When you yank a poison ivy vine off bark, you atomize the bark dust into the air around your face, and that dust is coated in urushiol oil. That's how people end up in the emergency room. Daniel showed me a better way in 2006. I had a wild grape and a poison ivy vine tangled together in a pear tree, and I was about to cut the ivy off and pull it down by hand, wearing nothing but leather gloves. Daniel stopped me. He said, "You don't pull it down, Bill. You cut it twice and let the tree finish it." That single sentence is the spine of this whole method. I'm going to walk you through this in 6 steps, and at the end, I'll come back to that one thing I do with the cut vine afterward that most people get completely wrong. Step 1, but pick the right time. I do this job in a narrow window in late October to early November after the vine has dropped most of its leaves and before the ground locks up with a hard freeze. There are 3 reasons that window matters, and I want to be straight with you about all of them. First, urushiol concentration in the stems is at its yearly low once the plant starts shutting down for winter. The oil is still there. Make no mistake, dormant poison ivy will still dose you, but it's the least loaded the plant gets all year. Second, with the leaves gone, you can actually see what you're working on. In July, that vine on the apple tree was hidden behind a curtain of 3 leaf clusters, and the wild grape leaves tangled in with it. In late October, with the leaves down, I could see every branch of the vine, every place it had wrapped around the trunk, every spot where I needed to make a cut. Third, the tree itself is dormant. Apple trees in late October aren't moving sap, so if my saw bumps the bark, the tree isn't bleeding out. It just sits there, healing slowly over winter. The result of getting step 1 right is simple. You go into this job seeing what you're doing, working on a plant that's at its least dangerous, and protecting a tree that isn't actively wounded. I waited until the morning after our 3rd hard frost. I walked the orchard with my coffee the way Daniel taught me to do every morning, and the vine on that Stayman winesap was finally fully visible for the first time in months. Step 2, suit up properly. I want to be honest with you, this is the step most people skip, and it's the step that decides whether you go home itchy or whether you go home fine. I have a dedicated set of clothes for this job, and this job only. A heavy cotton long sleeve shirt that I bought at a farm store for about $12 8 years ago. An old pair of jeans that don't go in the regular wash with anything else. Those 2 pieces of clothing live in a paper grocery bag on a shelf in my shed from one poison ivy session to the next. I do not wear them for anything else. I do not let them touch the rest of my laundry. On my hands, I wear 2 layers. Nitrile gloves first, the disposable kind you can buy in a box of 100 for $10 or $12 at any hardware store. Nitrile actually blocks urushiol. Latex doesn't. Cotton work gloves alone don't. The nitrile is the real barrier. But nitrile tears on rough bark in about 30 seconds. So on top of the nitrile, I pull on a pair of leather work gloves. The leather protects the nitrile from tearing, and the nitrile protects my skin from the oil. That layering matters. One without the other doesn't work. On my face, I wear safety glasses, the wraparound kind, not the open-sided shop glasses, and a bandana tied over my nose and mouth. The bandana isn't for breathing protection in any serious sense. It's there so that when bark dust drifts up while I'm sawing, it doesn't land on my upper lip or in my nostrils. The result of getting step 2 right is that when the job is over, every square inch of skin that could have touched the vine was covered by something that blocks the oil. The first time I did this job after Daniel coached me, I checked myself in the bathroom mirror that night looking for the rash I'd gotten every other time. Nothing, not a spot. That was the moment I knew the suit up wasn't optional. It's the whole game. Step 3, locate the cut points and make the 2 cuts. Here's where I named the tool, because I told you in the beginning it was one hand tool that cost me $11. It's a 7-inch folding pruning saw, the Corona style folding saw you'll find at any hardware store, any farm store, any decent garden center. $11. Mine has been sharpened twice and used on probably 40 jobs over the last 15 years, and it still cuts clean. That's the entire tool list. No loppers, no chainsaw, no herbicide sprayer, one folding saw. Now here's where most people mess up, so stick with me. You walk to the base of the tree and you brush away the leaf litter at the root flare with your boot. Not your hands, your boot. You want to expose the bare stem of the vine right where it comes out of the ground. On my apple tree, the vine was as thick as a broom handle at that point, and the bark on a vine that looks hairy and rough, almost like a piece of rope. That hairy bark is what holds the urushiol oil. Do not touch it. Once you can see the vine clearly at ground level, you pick 2 cut points. The first cut goes as low to the ground as your saw will reach, within an inch of the soil if you can get there. The second cut goes 18 to 24 inches up from the first cut. That's 1.5 to 2 feet of vine you're going to remove as a complete ring. I make the lower cut first. I let the weight of the vine settle, then I make the upper cut, and a section of vine the length of a yardstick comes out of the tree and lands at my feet. It's still attached to the rest of the upper vine only in the sense that it was a moment ago. Once those 2 cuts are made, the root crown is one piece. The bottom ring of vine is the second piece, and everything above the uppercut is now a third piece that is no longer connected to its own roots. The failure mode here is making only 1 cut and then trying to peel the vine off the bark. People do this every year. They cut at the ground, they grab the vine up high, they pull, and they get a face full of bark dust and a hospital trip. 2 cuts, ring removed, walk away from the tree. That's the move. The result of getting step 3 right is that in about 10 minutes of sawing with one $11 tool, you have severed a 26-year-old vine from its root system without ever touching the plant with your skin and without putting a drop of chemical near your tree. Before I move into step 4, I want to pause for a sec. If what I'm walking you through here is making sense, if you're tired of the chemical treadmill and fighting the same problem in your garden every single year, I want to tell you about a book I put together called the 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. Chapter 1 is the origin story of this whole approach. It's the afternoon in 2003 when I finally put down the Roundup and the 7 Dust for good after watching Daniel's garden thrive year after year without any of it. The book is $17 at backyardbillbooks.com, and there's a link in the description. If you're watching on your TV, point your phone at the QR code on screen. Take your time. Go ahead and grab the phone, unlock it, line it up. I'll be right here when you get back. All right, let's keep going. Step 4, leave the upper vine completely alone. This is the part of the method that came straight from Daniel, and it's the part most people get wrong even after they've made the 2 cuts correctly. Once you've removed that 24-inch ring of stem, the section of vine still running up the trunk and out into the canopy is severed from its root system. It has no water supply. It has no way to push new growth. It is, for all practical purposes, already dead, but it just doesn't look dead yet. Over the next 8 to 14 months, that upper vine will dry out from the inside, the tissues will desiccate, the urushiol bearing sap will break down, and the dead stem will slough off the bark on its own. On the stamen wine sap, the bulk of the dead vine came down in pieces through the following summer. By the second autumn, the trunk was clean. I'll tell you something about that tree. I'd actually spotted how thick the vine had gotten during one of my morning observation walks the previous April. Daniel taught me that practice 18 years ago. Coffee in one hand, 10 minutes, just walking the rows and looking at things instead of working on them. That particular morning, I was standing under the stamen watching a lacewing on the bark, and my eye traveled down the trunk, and I realized the vine at the root flare had gotten as thick as a broom handle. I'd been walking past it for years and not really seeing it. Daniel told me once, you can't tend what you don't see, Bill. So that morning I knew the October job was coming. Daniel said the rule itself to me back in 2006 the first time, and he said it the same way every time the subject has come up since. You don't pull it down, Bill. You cut it twice and let the tree finish it. The tree finishes it. That's the rule. Pulling on a freshly cut vine is what gets people dosed. The bark is still loaded with oil, and yanking it scrapes and atomizes that bark dust right into your face and onto your forearms. The result of getting step 4 right is that you do nothing, and nature does the rest. No second exposure, no second risk. Step 5, treat the cut stump without herbicide. After the uppercuts are done, you're left with a stump at ground level, the root crown of the vine still alive, still capable of resprouting next spring if you walk away from it and forget about it. I don't use brush killer near a fruit tree. I never will. What I do instead is what Ruth showed me she does for the stubborn weeds that come up around her foundation plantings. I boil a full kettle of water, about 6 cups, and I pour it directly onto the cut stump while it's still steaming. Then I do it again the next week and the week after that. 3 pours, 1 a week for 3 weeks running. The mechanism is simple. Sustained heat ruptures the cells in the root crown and cooks the vine's ability to push new growth right out of the soil for a few inches down. It costs nothing. It doesn't move sideways into the tree's root zone. If I'm dealing with an especially old root system and the one on the stamen wine sap was 26 years old, I'll pack the surface of the cut stump with about a tablespoon of plain rock salt after the second pour, and I replace it after any heavy rain. The salt stays right on the stump where I put it, doesn't migrate, and it finishes off whatever the boiling water didn't get. By the following spring, the root crown is dead and there is no resprout. The result of getting step 5 right is a permanent removal, no chemicals anywhere near your tree, and a stump that will rot away into the soil on its own over the next 2 seasons. Step 6, decontaminate everything and do it the same afternoon while the oil is still wet on the surfaces. Urushiol does not evaporate. It does not break down sitting in your shed over the winter. I've heard of people getting a rash off a pair of gloves they hadn't worn in over a year. So when I come back from a poison ivy job, the first thing I do is stop on the back porch and not touch anything I don't have to. The saw gets wiped down with a rag soaked in rubbing alcohol. Every inch of the blade, the handle, the pivot point. Then it gets washed a second time with dish soap and hot water and set out in the sun to dry. The leather work gloves and the nitrile gloves underneath them go straight into a heavy contractor bag sealed and set aside for the solar treatment I'm about to tell you about in a few minutes. The cotton shirt and the old jeans come off on the porch, not in the house, on the porch, and they go straight into the washer on cold by themselves with a double dose of detergent. Cold, not hot. Hot water can actually help spread the oil if there's any concentrated residue on the fabric. The safety glasses and the bandana get the same alcohol wipe as the tools, and then I shower. I do cool water first to close my pores, then warm with plenty of soap, paying particular attention to my forearms, my wrists, and the back of my neck, which is where most accidental contact tends to land even when you've layered up properly. The result of getting step 6 right is that you finish the job clean. No delayed rash 3 days later, no oil sitting on a tool handle waiting for the next person who picks it up. From the moment I picked up the $11 saw to the moment I stepped into the shower on the stamen wine sap job, the total time was right around 40 minutes. There are 3 mistakes I see almost every year on this job, and any one of them can turn a 40-minute project into a hospital trip or kill a tree you've been growing for 2 decades. The first one is reaching for Roundup or brush killer and spraying the vine while it's still attached to the tree. I've watched 2 neighbors lose mature apple trees this way. One of them, a Jonathan that had been bearing fruit for 15 years. The herbicide travels through the soil and into the shared root zone, and a fruit tree that's already under stress from a vine girdling its trunk does not have the reserves to shrug off a chemical hit on its roots underneath. Both trees were dead within 2 seasons. The correction is straightforward. Physical removal only, no herbicides anywhere near a tree you actually want to keep. The second mistake is trying to pull the dead-looking vine off the tree the same day or even the same season as the cut. The vine looks dead. It is not safe. The bark and the dried stem hold urushiol for months, sometimes more than a year. The worst exposures I've ever heard about came from people who made the cuts correctly, waited 2 weeks, then went up the ladder and yanked. Whole body rash. One man I know spent 3 days in the hospital because the airborne bark dust got into his eyes and into his lungs at the same time. The correction is the Daniel rule: cut twice, walk away, let the tree drop the vine on its own timeline. The third mistake is doing this work in July. Late summers when the vine is in full leaf, urushiol is at its yearly peak in every part of the plant. The leaves catch on every passing sleeve and you can't even see what you're sawing through under the foliage. The correction is patience. Wait for late October, after the 3rd or 4th hard frost, when the leaves have dropped and the urushiol concentration in the stems is at its lowest point of the year. The job is easier, safer, and cleaner in every single way. Now, I told you at the start I'd share the one thing I do with the cut vine afterward that most people get completely wrong. Here it is. I take those 24-inch vine sections and I double bag them in heavy black contractor bags, the 3 mil kind, the thick ones, not the thin kitchen bags. I seal each bag with duct tape across the top, then I tape the seal again for good measure. Then I lay the bags flat in full sun on the south side of my shed and I leave them there for a full growing season, minimum 90 days, ideally April through October. Here's the math. On a sunny summer afternoon, the interior of one of those black bags hits 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Urushiol, that's the oil pollen poison ivy that causes the rash, is heat label above about 130 degrees sustained. Bake it long enough and the UV plus the heat oxidizes it into compounds that don't bother human skin anymore. After one full season in the sun, the vine inside is desiccated, brittle, and safe enough to add to a slow brush pile away from the garden. Another year in the brush pile, and it breaks down completely. Now here's where most people get it wrong, and I want to be straight with you because this matters. The first thing people do is burn it. Don't. Daniel's wife Ruth told me once about her father back in the 1970s. He burned a brush pile that had some poison ivy mixed in, spent one afternoon downwind of that smoke, and lost the better part of a season of farm work to the respiratory damage and the eye damage. Urushiol vaporizes in smoke and goes straight into your lungs. The second thing people do is throw it in the compost. Urushiol persists in soil for 1 to 5 years. The third thing is bagging it and sending it to the landfill the same week. It'd be the bag tiers. And the next person who handles that trash gets dosed. Solar bake, then brush pile it. That's the way. Before I let you go, I want to come back to one more thing. This job, I'm picking late October, working with the tree's dormancy, planning the disposal months ahead. That's not a tip. That's a rhythm. And the rhythm is exactly what I lay out in Chapter 9 of my book, The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. Chapter 9 is the seasonal maintenance calendar. Month by month, the small jobs like this one that keep a garden working with nature year-round. It's everything Daniel showed me over 35 years, organized into a 30-day protocol. You can start this weekend. $17 at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're watching this on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time pulling it up. I'll be right here. There's also a link in the description if you're already on your phone or laptop. So that's how I pulled 26 years of poison ivy off a Stamen winesap apple tree in 40 minutes with an $11 saw, and the tree is putting on new trunk growth this spring for the first time in years. Daniel's still doing this same job every fall on his own orchard and on a few hundred Amish farms across Lancaster County right now. This is just how late October looks. If you want to see the other tool that changed my garden the most after I put down the rototiller, watch my video on the Broad Fork next. Drop a note in the comments and let me know what your worst poison ivy situation looks like. I read them. I'll see you in the next one.